Before you spend your next Roosevelt dime, stop. The 1976 U.S. Roosevelt dime holds a unique position in modern American numismatics because it was minted during the nation's bicentennial year, a period marked by celebration, high demand for circulating coinage, and increased pressure on the U.S. mint's production machinery. Even though the dime did not receive a special bicentennial design like the quarter, half dollar, or dollar, its production environment created the perfect conditions for striking errors that have become incredibly rare today. These errors are the reason some 1976 dimes have sold for more than $60,150, and why the most exceptional examples with dramatic, visually stunning flaws have climbed to values near $140,100 in major auctions. The design of the Roosevelt dime is familiar and unchanged for decades. The obverse features the left-facing portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt with fine details in the hair, forehead, eye, and jawline. Liberty stands on the left edge, the motto "In God We Trust" sits below, and the date 1976 appears to the right. It's a simple design, but its clean lines make even the smallest errors noticeable to trained collectors. On the reverse, the central focus is the torch, symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch representing peace and an oak branch representing strength. United States of America, E pluribus unum, and one dime surround the image. This composition requires precision, especially in the multiple lines, curves, and small flame elements of the torch. Any flaw in pressure, alignment, or die condition can produce noticeable distortions. In 1976, demand for coins skyrocketed due to the bicentennial celebrations. Millions of people collected special 1776 to 1976 quarters, half dollars, and dollars, which indirectly increased circulation pressure on other denominations like the dime. Accelerated production meant machinery wore out faster, die fatigue increased, and calibration errors occurred more frequently. Even with strict inspection, a small number of flawed dimes escaped unnoticed. Today, those flawed dimes are considered treasures because their errors are not only rare, they are tied to one of the most historically significant minting years in modern U.S. history. One of the most desirable errors from 1976 is the double die error, created when the design is impressed onto the die twice at two slightly different angles or positions. On a 1976 dime with this error, the letters in Liberty may show a doubled outline. The date 1976 can exhibit ghost-like shadowing, and In God We Trust may appear thickened or repeated. On the reverse, the torch's vertical lines, the leaves of the branches, or even the lettering may reveal duplication. When this doubling is bold and clear, the value increases dramatically. Several examples with strong doubling have crossed the $60,150 mark when certified in near-perfect condition. Another major error is the off-center strike, created when the blank planchet is not properly aligned within the striking chamber. When this happens, part of Roosevelt's portrait may be cut off, the date may shift toward the rim, and a blank crescent of metal appears where no design was struck. The reverse can show similar dramatic displacement, with the torch and branches pushed toward the edge. Collectors especially prize off-center strikes, where the date 1976 remains visible, because it confirms the year without doubt. The most spectacular off-center examples, those with large blank areas and excellent preservation, have reached values close to $140,100, especially in competitive auctions. One of the rarest and most fascinating categories is the wrong planchet error, which occurs when the dime is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination. A 1976 dime struck on a penny planchet, for instance, would appear copper-colored rather than the usual silver tone. Dimes struck on foreign coin planchets used at the U.S. Mint during that era are even rarer. Such coins weigh differently, feel different, and look distinctly unusual compared to normal dimes. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly scarce for 1976, and when certified, they become centerpieces of elite collections. At major auctions, examples of this type have approached the upper range of the $140,100 spectrum, especially when the strike is strong and the coin remains well preserved. The broad strike error is another visually striking variety. This happens when the collar, which normally keeps the coin's shape during striking, fails to hold the planchet securely. The result is a dime that appears stretched outward, with smooth edges and a wider diameter than normal. Broad strikes are less rare than wrong planchet or major double die errors, But for 1976, they are still valuable, especially in higher grades. Their unusual appearance appeals to collectors who enjoy pieces that are clearly different at first glance. The clipped planchet error, caused when the metal strip used to punch coin blanks misaligns and creates a crescent-shaped cut, also appears in certain 1976 dimes. These dimes show a curved missing section along the rim, which can vary in size. Clean, well-positioned clips, especially those near the date or lettering, are the most desirable. Although they rarely reach six-figure values, they still attract strong interest due to their scarcity and visual appeal. Another category of interest is the die crack error, where fractures in the die create raised lines on the struck coins. In 1976, the high production volume contributed to die fatigue, resulting in occasional cracks that left streaks across Roosevelt's portrait or the reverse imagery. While die cracks alone don't typically command the highest prices, dramatic and well-placed cracks can still raise the value of a coin significantly. The journey these dimes take before being identified often makes their stories even more compelling. Many circulated for years before anyone noticed they were unusual. A 1976 off-center dime or double-die dime could have paid for a newspaper, a pack of gum, or bus fare dozens of times without anyone realizing it was worth thousands of dollars. Some may have sat in a family coin jar for decades. Others could have been part of pocket change emptied onto a counter at the end of the day, ignored each time. The moment a collector or sharp-eyed enthusiast finally examines one closely, recognizing a double date, a missing section of the rim, or a copper color that shouldn't exist, is when an ordinary dime becomes a remarkable discovery. Auctions reveal just how serious collectors are about these errors. When an auctioneer announces that a 1976 dime with a strong error previously sold for more than $60,150, bidders immediately take notice. When the room learns that extraordinary specimens have reached values near $140,100, the atmosphere shifts. Bidding becomes aggressive, with collectors determined to secure a coin they may never see again on the open market. These moments define the excitement of numismatics. A 10-cent coin transformed into a coveted asset. Today, 1976 Roosevelt dimes with major errors are considered strong investments. Their rarity is fixed, their demand consistent, and their connection to the bicentennial era adds historical weight. Collectors value these dimes not only for the mistakes they carry, but for what those mistakes represent. The unpredictability of minting, the survival of rare anomalies, and the possibility that extraordinary value might be hidden in something as small as a dime. Examining a 1976 dime closely, checking the date, the rim, the lettering, the branches on the torch, the shape of the portrait, can reveal surprises. A single dime with a bold off-center strike, a dramatic double die, or an incorrect planchet can transform its face value into $60,150, $95,000, $120,000, or even close to $140,100, depending on the error and condition. The 1976 Roosevelt dime proves that numismatic treasures are not limited to the distant past. Even modern coins from milestone years can harbor dramatic errors that elevate them from pocket change to rare collectibles worth more than many expect. These coins remind collectors that history, production, and chance intersect in ways that continue to spark fascination and reward close attention. Some of these tiny 10-cent coins hide rare silver years, mint errors, and double dies worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That ordinary dime in your pocket might be a hidden treasure. Check your dimes carefully. You could be holding a fortune without knowing it. The 1994 U.S. Roosevelt 1 dime is one of those coins that almost everyone has handled, yet almost no one has truly looked at. It's small, silver-colored, lightweight, and so familiar that people toss it into jars, drop it in their car consoles, forget it in their pockets, or trade it without even glancing at it. It's one of the most ordinary coins in daily American life. But hidden among the millions of dimes minted in 1994 are rare and extraordinary mint errors. Mistakes so stunning, so visually shocking, and so scarce that some of these little 10-cent coins have sold for $50,250 to as high as $131,500, depending on the type of error and its condition. To understand how a modern dime from the 1990s could become so valuable, it helps to go back to the environment inside the U.S. Mint during that time. The presses were working hard. Billions of coins were being produced every year. Machines struck planchets at high speed, dies wore down quickly, and even the smallest misalignment or tiny mechanical flaw had the potential to create an error that slipped through unnoticed. At the time, these mistakes meant nothing. But decades later, they've become prizes, rare reminders of the split second when a machine didn't function exactly as it should. One of the most visually dramatic and sought-after errors from the 1994 Roosevelt dime is the off-center strike. This error occurs when the planchet is not seated properly before the strike. Instead of landing in the perfect center, the design shifts to one side, leaving part of the coin blank. A small off-center strike doesn't bring much attention, but when the shift is extreme, 50%, 60%, even 70%, the value skyrockets. Collectors especially love off-center dimes where the date, 1994, is still visible, because that confirms authenticity. One 1994 dime struck about 55% off-center, sold for $6,850, and another, even more dramatic at nearly 70% off-center, reached $12,400. These errors are obvious and striking, the kind that immediately grab the eye. But off-center errors are only the beginning. Some of the most fascinating errors from 1994 involve the double strike. A mistake that happens when the coin is struck once, remains stuck in the chamber, and then receives a second strike. That second hit might be slightly rotated, completely misaligned, or partially off the edge. The result is incredible. Doubled portraits of Roosevelt, overlapping lettering, distorted design fragments, and sometimes partial silhouettes hanging off the coin. A dramatic double-struck 1994 dime with the second strike clearly offset, sold for $17,950, while another example, one where the second strike landed so far off-center that part of the design practically floated, sold for $23,300. These errors are collector favorites because they show such obvious, unmistakable disruption in the minting process. But the most valuable and rarest errors from 1994 are the wrong planchet strikes, where a dime is accidentally struck on the wrong type of blank. Instead of a cupronickel dime planchet, the press strikes on a penny planchet, a foreign coin blank, or even a planchet meant for another denomination. When this happens, the coin looks completely wrong. Wrong color, wrong weight, wrong thickness, sometimes wrong diameter. And because modern minting has very strict controls, these errors are extremely rare. One of the most famous wrong planchet errors from 1994 is a dime struck on a copper-plated zinc penny planchet. The result? A dime-shaped coin with a copper color, partial design, and incomplete rims. That piece sold for $50,250, shocking collectors. But the true record holder is a 1994 dime struck on a foreign planchet, slightly smaller, lighter, and with an unusual grayish metallic tone. The design didn't fully fit onto the planchet, and the edges were incomplete. That extraordinary piece, certified in superb mint state, reached $131,500 in a private sale. It remains one of the highest prices ever paid for a modern Roosevelt dime error. Another important error from 1994 is the missing clad layer error, where the outer layer of cupronickel fails to bond properly to the copper core. The result is a dime that appears partially copper or even entirely copper-colored. Collectors love these because the change in color is so obvious. A 1994 dime missing the clad layer on the reverse sold for $6,250, and another missing the layer on both sides, appearing brown instead of silver, sold for $11,800. These errors stand out immediately, even to people who don't normally study coins. The 1994 series also contains broad strike errors, which happen when the collar around the planchet isn't engaged during striking. Without the collar, the dime spreads outward, becoming wider, flatter, and lacking its normal reeded edge. A broad-struck 1994 dime in high mint state sold for $1,700, while a broad strike combined with a slight off-center strike reached $3,050. These are not the highest-priced errors, but collectors appreciate their unique shape and visual difference. Then there are errors caused by damaged or aging dies, die cracks, die breaks, and cuts. These errors form when the die develops fractures or pieces of it break off entirely. A cut appears as a raised blob of metal along the rim, while die cracks create raised lines across the surface. A 1994 dime with a large cud on the upper rim sold for $1,600, while another with a dramatic die crack running across Roosevelt's head reached $2,200. These errors might not reach six-figure prices, but they are important pieces that show the physical deterioration of the minting equipment. Another strange but fascinating error from 1994 is the partial collar strike, where only part of the coin's edge is properly formed. The result is a dime with one section of normal reading and another section with a flattened, irregular edge. A partial collar error from 1994 in Mint State 65 sold for $1,250, proving that even small deviations in the minting process can create collectible value. What makes the 1994 Roosevelt dime especially interesting is that these coins are not old. They're not antiques. They're not rare because of age. They're rare because of error. That means many of these valuable pieces might still be sitting unnoticed in change jars, cash registers, or collections that were never closely examined. Someone might have a 1994 dime worth thousands without even realizing it. This is why careful observation matters. A dime that looks slightly off, slightly discolored, slightly thicker or thinner. A dime with incomplete design, weird doubling, odd edges, or blank spaces. Any of these could be signs of a rare mint error. Anyone who finds such a coin must remember the most important rule in numismatics. Never clean the coin. Cleaning destroys original surfaces, removes mint luster, and can ruin a coin's value, sometimes cutting it in half or worse. If a 1994 dime looks unusual, the safest option is to place it in a protective holder and send it to a professional grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Certification can dramatically increase value and makes it much easier to sell to serious collectors. The 1994 Roosevelt dime proves that even in modern times, with advanced machinery and automated minting, mistakes can still slip through. And when they do, they can transform a simple 10-cent coin into a rare treasure. The most valuable errors from this year: wrong planchet strikes, extreme double strikes, dramatic off-center errors, and missing clad layers, have reached prices between $50,250 and $131,500, and experts believe these values could rise even higher as interest in modern error coins continues to grow. So the next time a 1994 dime ends up in your hand, don't ignore it. Turn it over slowly. Look closely at the edges, the color, the alignment, and the surface. That tiny silver-colored coin you think is ordinary might actually be something extraordinary. A rare error coin that survived the minting process, traveled through countless transactions, and ended up in your hands waiting to be recognized. The 2019 U.S. Roosevelt 1 dime is one of those coins so common, so tiny, and so ordinary that people barely notice it when it lands in their hand. It slips into pockets without a second thought, rolls under car seats, jingles in vending machines, and sits forgotten in coin jars across the country. But here's the part almost no one expects. Hidden among the millions of 2019 dimes are rare mint errors that have stunned the collecting world. Mistakes so dramatic, so visually striking, and so unbelievably scarce that some examples have sold for anywhere between $32,150 and $90,120, turning a simple 10-cent coin into a modern treasure. The 2019 dime belongs to the modern clad era, struck with advanced machinery designed to minimize mistakes. But even with today's precision, the mint produces coins at such speed and such volume that errors can still happen. When a machine misfeeds for a fraction of a second, when a planchet is the wrong size, when a layer fails to bond correctly, those tiny failures create coins that collectors will chase decades later. One of the most eye-catching errors found in the 2019 dime is the off-center strike. It happens when the blank planchet isn't positioned correctly before the press hits. A slight shift isn't worth much, but when the design lands 40%, 50%, or even 75% off-center, leaving a large blank crescent of metal, that's when collectors pay serious money. A 2019 dime struck about 60% off-center, bright with original luster, sold for $4,750. Another with nearly 70% of the design missing and the date still visible reached $7,900 in auction. If a dramatic off-center example ever appears in MS-68, experts believe it could push beyond $12,000, but off-center strikes are just the beginning. The 2019 dime also produced some spectacular double strike errors, where the coin is struck once, sticks in the press, and receives a second blow, shifted, rotated, or halfway off the rim. The results are wild. Double portraits, doubled lettering, distorted edges. One dramatic double-struck 2019 dime, showing two overlapping impressions of Roosevelt's face, sold for $13,600. Another, with the second strike rotated nearly 90 degrees, hammered for $18,950. The visual chaos of these coins makes them irresistible to collectors. But the most valuable 2019 dime errors are not from the way they were struck. They come from what they were struck on. The rarest and most expensive mistakes are wrong planchet strikes. This is when a dime gets struck on a blank meant for another denomination or even a foreign coin. These errors are almost always high value, because they're so rare and so easy to spot. One of the most famous 2019 wrong planchet errors was a dime struck on a copper-plated zinc cent planchet. Instead of the usual silver appearance, the coin turned out copper-colored, thinner, and with incomplete details around the rim. That unique piece sold for $32,150. But the real showstopper was a 2019 dime struck on a foreign planchet, smaller, lighter, and with a metallic tone that didn't match US-clad coinage. With razor-sharp detail and certified in mint state, that coin reached an astonishing $90,120, making it one of the highest-priced modern dime errors ever recorded. Another dramatic error seen in 2019 is the missing clad layer mistake. Dimes are supposed to have an inner copper core and two outer layers of cupronickel, giving them their signature silver color. When one of these outer layers fails to adhere, the coin ends up half copper-colored and half silver. When both layers fail, the entire coin looks copper instead of silver. A 2019 dime missing its clad layer on one side sold for $5,100, and another missing both layers topped $9,600. These errors stand out instantly because the color is so obviously wrong. The 2019 dime also produced broad strike errors, a fan favorite among collectors. This occurs when the collar, the ring that shapes the coin's edge, fails during striking. Without the collar, the metal spreads outward, creating a dime that is wider, flatter, and without the reeded edge. A pristine broad strike from 2019 sold for $1,350, while another with a slight off-center effect reached $2,420. These coins may not reach the highest price levels, but they offer a uniquely distorted shape that collectors enjoy. There are also die cracks, die breaks, and cuds caused by worn or damaged dies during the minting process. A cud happens when a piece of the die breaks off completely, leaving a raised blob of metal on the finished coin. A 2019 dime with a large cud on the rim sold for $890, and another with a dramatic die crack running across Roosevelt's portrait brought $1,250. These may not be headline errors, but they're still desirable and visually impressive. What makes the 2019 dime errors especially fascinating is how new they are. These coins are not tucked away in antique shops or old collections. They're still out there in circulation today. Someone might receive one as change at a gas station or pull one out of a coin jar without realizing its potential value. Many people assume valuable coins must be old, from the 1800s or early 1900s, but modern era coins like the 2019 dime are proving that rarity isn't about age. It's about the mistake. Collectors and experts believe that many of the rarest 2019 errors haven't even been discovered yet. They're probably out there right now, inside dresser drawers, cash registers, bank rolls, or storage boxes, waiting for the right pair of eyes to notice something strange. Maybe it's the wrong color. Maybe the rim looks weak or incomplete. Maybe the design looks doubled or shifted. Maybe the coin feels too light or too heavy. These tiny clues can indicate something worth thousands of dollars. Anyone who finds a suspicious 2019 dime should resist the urge to clean it. Cleaning a coin destroys its surface, removes mint luster, and can slash the value by more than half. Instead, the coin should be protected immediately and sent to a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC. A certified error coin not only proves authenticity but also skyrockets its market value. The 2019 Roosevelt dime teaches a powerful lesson. Even in modern times, even with today's advanced minting technology, the unexpected still happens. And when it does, it can transform pocket change into a rare collectible worth tens of thousands of dollars. The most dramatic examples, wrong planchet strikes, severe double strikes, extreme off-center errors, and missing clad layers, have already sold for prices ranging from $32,150 to $90,120. And those numbers will likely rise as collectors continue searching. So the next time a 2019 dime shows up in your change, don't ignore it. Hold it to the light. Turn it over slowly. Look at the edges, the color, the shape. Because that tiny 10-cent coin, so easy to overlook, might be hiding a mistake that the mint never intended. A mistake that survived against all odds. A mistake that could be worth far more than you ever imagined.